Hello, everyone, and welcome to our sessions. My name is Ngoc Anh Nguyen, and I'm the lead coordinator of the policy coalitions under the Asia's Finals Coalitions, or AfA. So the AfA Policy Coalitions is a member-driven working group that aims to demystify animal policy advocacy and help advocates at all levels, from local grassroots organizations to large international NGOs, participate in policy-related work. We organize events, provide an international support network, develop and share resources, and help members obtain support from external partners. Members are provided with regular news, updates, and communications, and are invited to quarterly meetings. We encourage member organizations to both offer and seek help from each other and work together in the policy advocacy space. And for more information about the Asia for Animals Coalitions and our working group, please visit our website at asiaforanimals.com. And now let me introduce our distinguished speakers for today's sessions. First, we have Altamush Saaed. Altamush is a BIPOC award-winning Pakistani interspecies justice lawyer, activist, philanthropist, and teacher. He is an animal law professor at the University of Central Punjab Law School in Lahore, where he teaches Pakistan's first animal law advocacy course. He's the founding managing partner at Environmental and Animal Rights Consultants, Pakistan's first dedicated animal and environmental law and policy firm. Altamush also co-founded the charity Doings Foundations, which works on interspecies justice and run Pakistan's first disaster zone farm animal shelter and plant-based school. Altamush has completed 4 law degrees, including a human rights international law from the University of Michigan, an animal law LMN, and an environmental law LMM from Lewis and Clark Law School, and a BA from Lahore University of Management Sciences in Pakistan. And next, we have Dr. Kate Littin. Dr. Kate Littin is an animal welfare scientist and experienced leader in animal welfare, agriculture, and food safety policy and regulations. She is a committed One Health, One Welfare advocate with a particular interest in supporting businesses to make positive change for nature, and serves on the boards and not-for-profit organizations involved in conservation and animal welfare. She has previously served as the chair of the World Organizations for Animal Health, Regional Animal Welfare Strategies Advisory Group for Asia and the Pacific, and remains involved in international, regional, and local animal welfare initiatives. And last but not least, we have Dr. Mark Jones. Dr. Jones trained as a vet at Liverpool University and worked extensively in fish health and disease control before spending 5 years traveling and working on rescue and rehabilitation projects for various species in South America and Asia. He holds master's degrees in both aquatic and wild animal health and has several years of experience in the non-governmental animal protection sector. And since 2014, Dr. Jones has been with the UK-based international wildlife charity, Born Free, where he currently serves as head of policy, managing a team focused on promoting progressive legislations concerning wildlife conservation, management, trade, and the welfare of both free living and captive wild animals at international, national, and local levels. Without further ado, let me invite our first speaker, Altamush, to begin his presentations. Altamush, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ngoc. Can I please share a video that I requested, if that's possible?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm actually going to be speaking on interspecies justice, which is essentially an idea where we connect human, animal, and environmental rights. It's one step ahead of One Health. And I would actually like to show you a video of some of our work that we're doing to show like how does it look like. I hope you can see it.
Hey, Altamush, just to check whether you should share audio. We can see the video, but we can't see we can't hear it.
Oh, then it's probably the internet. So there are subtitles.
Okay. But you can actually check in the share screen, the share audio option. You can just click that box. So it should be, you can stop sharing now. And then when you share
Okay.
again, there's the option to share audio should be somewhere at the right
I
side.
see it now. Sorry. Thank you.
There you go. You're welcome.
I'm really sorry. Interspecies justice is basically an idea where humans, animals, and the environment can live together. I'm actually an interspecies justice lawyer and activist. I teach animal law at a university in Pakistan. And animals are kind of invisible, at least in Pakistan. And when Mao came into my life, she showed me that animals exist in our community as well. And they're not just invisible beings, they have their own rights. I genuinely feel that my life's goal is to make the world a better place for humans, animals, and the environment. The intersection is actually true for all three. Because you have to create systems where you're generating kindness and some kind of resources for all parties. So we install carbon neutral, solar powered water projects across the country. And water access is a huge issue in my country. And the water projects actually provide clean drinking water to both humans and animals. When the floods happened in 2022, 1/3 of my country was underwater. Over 1.1 million farm animals died. We were rescuing humans, and what we thought was we could do the same things for farm animals as well. And eventually, we were funded actually by Humane Society International. In 2023, we were able to create this facility. Every month, we treat around 500 farm animals there. We actually started a small school. These people could not even go to school because they didn't have access to food. So what we did was we created a different kind of a curriculum. We were teaching them about animals and we were giving them food. Eventually, we shifted the whole meal plan and created the first plant-based school in Pakistan. That's what interspecies justice essentially means. The way we treat our animals is eventually the way we treat the environment and the humans as well. I hope you could see that. Now I will share my presentation itself. Apologies. Okay. And I hope everybody could see it. That's what I essentially mean by interspecies justice. And normally, all of my presentations start with an honest acknowledgement of what we're doing as a human species. And this is something that I always start with. I'm sure all of you have read this quote many times in your life, but what I'm asking you to do is read it from a perspective that animals are, all humans and animals as well. So interspecies justice would essentially mean the suffering of all beings, not just animals, but humans as well. And particularly in a country like Pakistan, this is extremely important because, as we've heard in previous presentations, in Pakistan particularly, animals are firstly invisible. You don't see them a lot because human suffering is at such a high level that it's really hard for people to understand. Secondly, there are not a lot of resources available as well. So the best way to actually go about interspecies justice and advocate for animal rights in Pakistan is to adopt this approach where you're helping humans, animals, and the environment at the same time. This is a picture from the Pakistani 2022 floods. Um, to give context, 1,700 human beings died in this floods. 1/3 of my country was underwater at one point. 1.1 million farm animals died as well, and we faced an economic loss of $30 billion. And to expect a country to, go beyond human rights when they're not being provided in the perfect instance, like even normal instances, it's really hard for these people. And this is basically us working with them in the community, on the ground, and the grassroots, to see that animals also are victims of disasters as well. And this is something we all know, but they don't. So you have to work with them. And this is where what we did was we created this first of its kind emergency veterinary camp. We provided them food and we worked with the community, and we saved over 8,000 farm animal lives. Essentially, because and why this was successful was because we have been working with the community for at least 10 years now, and now they know us. And so that trust gap is actually not there. And this is something really important that we need to understand. And after we go through this, these are a few anthropocentric questions that we ask ourselves. And this is something I always ask whenever I'm presenting. Is like, okay, let's think from a human perspective. How are we going to feed our population in 2050? And how are you going to save the human lives given the way we do things as well? And both of the answers, actually, even from an anthropocentric perspective, move towards the idea of interspecies justice. And this is something we all know about, but when you see it happening on the ground, it's a completely different experience. And for people in Pakistan to consider their human rights and while at the same time advocating for animals and the planet is the approach that essentially works. And this is something, a new term that was essentially coined by Dr. Hope Fedorsian, whom I work with, essentially. And this idea has been fueling most of my work. And so, give you an example, this is something you will not see across the world. So, this is very unique. This is a clean water project in the middle of a desert in Pakistan that is providing clean drinking water to both animals and children at the same time. So what we're doing here is that we are trying to help the community understand that their children have the same needs as the animals as well. And the project, by the way, is carbon neutral too. So we make sure that the environmental footprint is as minimal as possible. I know these are pretty out of the world ideas, but you have to be very creative when you don't have the resources. So essentially, when we built this first water project, it was only for human beings. The animals came eventually later because of my cat, the video that you saw. And so since then, we have been incorporating all of these three values together as much as we can for different kind of animals using different water projects across the country in Pakistan. And so we have built around 1,600 plus of these clean water projects, which help millions of animals and humans annually. And just to show you a perspective of one small water project does for a community, the yellow thingy you see on the bottom of the screen, I apologize for that, is basically one of those projects. And this is the community that's benefited by these because water as a resource is very scarce. And so if the humans don't get it, it also means that the animals will also not get it. And drought is something that's a constant disaster that happens across Pakistan. And so many animals' lives are lost that can be saved. So this kind of a solution does work, and we have seen it work on the ground in the community. These are some of the pictures from our disaster zone farm animal project. This was the first time we went into the flood zones in 2022. This kind of work has been done for the first time, and this taught us a lot of lessons. Firstly, there was what we saw in the floods was as well that people were trying to actually bring their animals alongside them, especially goats, because uh, even though they were livelihood for them, they were also part of family as well. And in Pakistan, at least outside urban cities, the relationship these families have with their animals is quite different. It's not just using for slaughter; they are a part of a family. It's like a multi-species justice family. But of course, if we want to prevent other harms that happen to these animals, we have to build a relationship with them and guide them onto advocating for farm animals alongside their relief. This is where we started this first of a kind facility in Pakistan, which I'm sure many of you not know about, but my country has a farm animal shelter now, where we don't even have a proper animal rights movement. So this place is something we started in 2023. We inaugurated in January, and ever since then, we have been providing veterinary aid to at least 500 farm animals on a daily basis. At the same time, we're working with the community as well, because you will not find many stray animals in rural Pakistan. You will not find dogs at all here. So it's entirely farm animals. And this is the first big step in our long journey on improving farm animal welfare conditions to farm animal rights eventually, but it flows alongside the human rights issues that we work on as well. So this is how it happened. But at the same time, what interspecies justice also means is you have to take care of the human community as well, especially in a country like Pakistan. So what we did was the same things we did for the animals, we did for the human beings as well, and vice versa. So building these houses, providing medical facilities, This is an example of an indigenous house that is also common in Africa as well. So instead of bringing in international technology that people, would get alienated with, or bringing in new words, you have to actually work with the system and help install them facilities that work for them, some things that they're already understanding about or have knowledge about. So these houses, which don't cost a lot, were something we built around 1,500 of these to help the communities and build that relationship. We also built societies that had a clean water project alongside them as well. So if there were any animals in the community, they would benefit too from it. This is something we also started out, another ambitious wild idea, which was to starting a school in a disaster zone. And this was because most of the schools that we were working with were destroyed in the floods. This is a very common that happens across the world. So we created a different trauma informed curriculum where we were teaching them about things that they didn't know, but at the same time we were also teaching them about animals. And we use different creative activities. In this case, artwork. And this is really good. I can never draw this good. And so we were trying to build that relationship in these children from a very young age. And eventually, we also shifted the meal plan to a plant-based meal plan. And this is for the animals, but also for the environment. It would make absolutely no sense to feed them animal agriculture, which was the leading cause of the floods that eventually happened. So it would make no sense, and we have to combine these values and work with the community. Unfortunately, the school is closed now because all of the children have shifted to their original schools. So we are starting a different kind of a project that we are going to go into schools and deliver these sessions, at least 40 plus sessions across the country, across Lahore, where I live, and help them introduce plant-based meals, at least one dish at a time in the next calendar year, which is one of our ongoing projects. Then after animals and humans comes the environment. This is where we're basically directing the water from these clean water projects to build these green community vegetable gardens. And we're planning to build 1,600 of these because they're linked directly to our clean water projects. And one of these supports 40 families with plant-based food, which is completely organic, animal cruelty free for the entire year. And this is actually us going into the grassroots, working with the communities and in a way, veganizing Pakistan, but from a more respectful perspective. That solves the problem of food security as well, removes animals from the food system, and helps these communities thrive as well. Another character or stakeholder that's often forgotten in interspecies justice or disasters is women. Women actually have a much stronger and closer connection with animals and the elderly and the children in their community. Given Pakistan is very patriarchal, women actually had a role of getting unclean murky water for their families by walking miles. Now they don't have to because these projects are within their communities. And this is an actual picture. These are just children, and they have this responsibility to work for get this water. Now they don't have to. That problem is solved. But at the same time, we're empowering them because these are the most important change makers in a disaster context if you want to save animal lives alongside human lives. And this is something we did, and it was very, very successful. So this was kind of something our progress has been in the 2022 floods, and we are, focusing all of these areas to build an animal rights movement that's indigenous, that's respectful, and can grow. While my current presentation doesn't cover my legal part, I'm also an animal rights lawyer, so I often sue the government on these issues, but I'm trying to build that relationship between the government and the NGOs, so it's very strategic. But to give you a case study example, which I would believe everybody understands, is of the Pakistani floods. Uh, so there were a lot of casualties. There were 1,700 deaths of human beings, but at the same time, there were over 1.1 million farm animal deaths. And as you can understand, the term livestock is used because that's the general term, and data for any other animal deaths was not collected at all. And the reason for that is livestock is considered livelihood, and this is all anthropocentric. And that's why we had data for these animals, and for the others, we didn't get anything. So even in that context, this is really important. So there was actually a study done right after the floods in UK at the Imperial College of London, and they basically predicted that the relationship between the floods and the climate change that happened was something that was predictable. And what they focus on was climate change, something we all know about. But this is alien to Pakistan, so I have to bring this point home as much as I can. So the relationship was right there, and this is something that we can truly acknowledge that anthropocentrism is something that's completely misaligned with interspecies justice. But there are a few things that we also need to understand is that we're asking the food system itself too much as well, without understanding how difficult or hard it is to even, go through the different pipelines that exist in the food system. We're asking the food system to solve the problem of malnutrition or food security. We're asking the food system to solve the problem of livelihood. We're asking the food system to solve climate change. We're asking the food system to solve public health issues as well. And we're also asking for animal rights as well, without understanding how complex it is. So the food system, in the way we do things right now, is something that's misunderstood, which makes it a victim. And this is a stat that I normally share. We all understand from a food security perspective, where only 17 calories out of 100 are something that we get from eating the animals, while we are using all of the land across the world to basically feed these animals, which could eventually go to feed the people. So these are some stats that I always use, and we are using these currently to file a case at the Supreme Court of Pakistan on the impacts of climate change and agriculture from a policy perspective. And these are something that we are using, especially the impact of greenhouse gas emissions, because that's the thing people want to hear, human lives, and connected with the disaster itself, but in a way that helps us save animal lives as well. So the connection is extremely important. And once again, you have to start from a grassroots perspective. And given Pakistan's responsibility under the Paris Agreement as well, the way we are treating the food system right now and not understanding it properly, uh, there is no way that we are going to achieve the 2-degree target or the 1.5-degree one that I'm pretty sure that we cannot meet now, given the way things are happening. This is another stat that we often forget, which is from a disaster perspective. And given globally, we don't have many disaster protection laws for animals. They don't exist, except in certain countries like the US. There's one in Indonesia. There's development for developing it in New Zealand. In my country, there's nothing at all, which I'm trying to change. So the way this system is connected and the way we are doing things right now, we can predict at least 560 disasters per year happening across the world. And that means millions, if not billions, of animal lives that will be lost alongside human lives as well. And countries like Pakistan will be the ones that will be affected the most. So this is the direct relation that interspecies justice and food systems and disasters have. You will understand all of these, but the main one that I want to highlight is intergenerational equity. So the thing is, what's happening in Pakistan right now is they're currently developing a new law that enhances livestock production in Pakistan as a mechanisms to boost the economy. But the thing is, the very reason the disasters in 2022 happened was because of the food system. And again, relying on that same food system to solve the economy problem puts countries like Pakistan in a cycle of intergenerational inequity that they can never escape from. And that's a very dark or stark reality for humans, animals, and the environment. And this is something we need to understand and acknowledge in the way the work we do. And but I hope I'm always on the optimistic side, and this is something that I always share at the end of my presentation, which is that we only have one life to make a difference. Please do it today. They, which can mean anybody, have only one life to feel the difference as well. So do it today. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope I did this, and I hope people learned that there are so many different ways to work with the community. And there are so many other things that we do, which I'm of course happy to share in Q&A as well that I couldn't cover here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Altamush, for that very insightful presentations. Your work in interspecies justice and disaster response is truly inspiring. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Kate Littin to share her insights. Dr. Kate Littin, please go ahead. And while we wait for Dr. Kate Littin to get ready, let's take a moment to come up with some questions for Altamush. You can put the questions in the chat box. Thank you.
Greetings, Ngoc Anh. Are you ready for me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I hope everyone can see my slides okay.
Yes.
Excellent. So thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very pleased to be speaking to a great audience of animal advocates. What I hope from my talk is to encourage more work between nature advocates and animal advocates. So what I have to say follows on really well from Altamush and from the work that we've just heard about. Thank you. So we'll cover climate change and animal welfare. What is One Health, One Welfare? Using One Health, One Welfare to address climate change. And I'll go through some case studies to give examples. So we already know a lot about climate change and animal welfare, and I'm sure you'll be familiar with the impacts. And again, we've heard about some of those already in previous speakers in previous sessions. We're talking about direct impacts on animals and indirect and hidden impacts on animals.
Sorry, Dr. Kate. Hi.
Hello.
So sorry to interrupt, but we couldn't see you somehow.
Can you see me now?
Not really. We only see the background, the Zoom background.
Is that better?
Okay. Oh, yes, we see you now. So sorry to interrupt.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. So when we're talking about the impacts of climate change, obviously direct impacts include heat stress, and then we have impacts of natural disasters like we've just heard about, and these are two examples of floods from New Zealand. We then have indirect impacts, which include increases in pests and diseases themselves, which have an impact on climate change through increasing emissions and changes in emissions from livestock and livestock farming. And then we also have the impacts on animals and animal welfare of the measures that we take to address climate change and to reduce emissions. So, for example, we've got one here from sustainable energy production, so the impacts of wind farms, for example. We also, of course, have the impacts of things that we do to reduce emissions in livestock, and I've got a couple of examples here. So it should be clear from these examples that I've shown you that they also have an impact on our communities and also on the environment. So what is One Health, One Welfare? The concept of One Health, One Welfare, again, we've heard from other speakers, and I've put a couple of quotes here that are ones that I really like because they highlight there that we've got animals, humans, and the environment interlinked. And you can see there that we're talking about using a One Health, One Welfare approach and replacing exploitation and annihilation with stewardship and responsibility for our planet and all its life forms. So what does this mean? So I just wanted to go through a few practical steps that we could take as nature advocates and animal advocates, and I've grouped them together as prioritising together, planning together, and carrying out programs together. Firstly, I want to talk about nature-based solutions, such as restoration, planting, and rewilding, which I'll talk a bit about, and responding and adapting to natural disasters. And then I'll also briefly mention livestock farming. So firstly, One Health, One Welfare and nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions include things like planting trees, restoring wetland and our coastal environments to improve biodiversity, reduce emissions, sequester carbon, and prevent the natural disasters such as flooding and slips and so on. There's an issue with what's some refer to as unwanted wildlife or as animal pests, and they have a negative impact on these types of programs. So I wanted to give a brief example from New Zealand, where rabbits that you can see on the screen are an introduced animal from Europe. We have a community project here that's replanting forest that's been working for 10 years. And you can see there the damage that the rabbits are doing to the trees. And the solution that the local authorities wanted to introduce here was releasing this chemical compound that you can see there called pindone. And here are some views that you can see expressed about pindone here. And the solution there was taking a science-based approach so that we could understand the impacts of the different control tools for rabbits. And this work was then used by nature advocates, animal advocates, scientists, and others. It included input from people who were involved with compassionate conservation. So that's Born Free, for example, that we hear from in with our next speaker. And you can see what I've highlighted down the bottom is where the idea was that we get good environmental outcomes, but that they take animal welfare and community values into account. So this is an example of what's essentially a One Health, One Welfare approach, where nature and animal advocates have worked together to prioritise and therefore improve outcomes. My next brief example is One Health, One Welfare approach, responding to climate-related emergencies. This slide here shows the impacts of Cyclone Gabrielle, which we had in New Zealand in February last year. And you can see here down the bottom of the screen the damage that was done to the farmland, so the livestock farmland in New Zealand, and the damage to the bridges over the river. So it should be clear from this that there's an impact on the communities as well as on animals and animal welfare, a significant economic impact on farmers, and a significant environmental impact as well. So the solution that was put together here with government support and the involvement of animal groups that were essentially animal rescue, but also animal welfare and emergency groups, and farmers and transport operators and government authorities, was to create a system where the livestock trucks that you can see in the centre there were assisted to cross rivers where the road had been damaged and remove livestock from those damaged farms when the livestock had no more food left. So this is an example where planning is a good One Health, One Welfare approach, where nature advocates, community charities and organisations involved in the community, government and other authorities were together involved and committed to supporting the activity. That's enabled by this plan that you can see here. This is a New Zealand law that requires the interests of animals and the environment and our communities to be taken into account. So this is an example of the One Health, One Welfare approach working together in the plan or planning area. Finally, I just briefly wanted to mention a One Health, One Welfare approach in livestock farming. So most of you, probably all of you, will be aware that one of the recommendations is to reduce the numbers of livestock for farming, and that will therefore reduce emissions, and it will reduce the impacts of climate change and over time reduce climate change. Obviously, with so much of the world being involved in livestock farming or involved in the processing and production of food from animals, this has a significant impact on communities as well. So it's really important that one way that we can think of it is by taking a One Health, One Welfare approach also in livestock farming. So what you can see here on my screen is just one way of thinking about this issue. And this is the World Organization for Animal Health vision paper on animal welfare that describes a one health, one welfare approach to livestock farming. So just in conclusion, hopefully I've just given you a few examples that, along with our previous speaker, and also you'll hear from Mark, will show how we can use a one health, one welfare approach to prioritise issues together, plan at a national, regional and local level, and work together on collaborative programs to lead to the best outcomes overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kate Littin, for that very enlightening presentations. Your advocacy for one health and one welfare approaches is very essential for creating sustainable solutions for all. Next, let's hear from Dr. Mark Jones. Dr. Jones, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll just see if I can get my presentation set up.
Yeah, it is sharing, Doctor.
Can you see that? Can you see that in full screen view?
Yeah, we can see it in full screen.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much. My name's Mark Jones. As Ngoc Anh said in her introduction, I'm a veterinarian by training. I worked in veterinary practice and in aquaculture and fisheries before traveling extensively and working in wildlife rescue and rehabilitation, initially in South America and latterly in Asia. And since 2008, I've been working in the NGO sector doing international policy work. And in 2014, I joined the Born Free Foundation based in the south of England, where I'm currently head of policy. Born Free is 40 years old this year, and while these days we've expanded our activities to include field conservation projects, education and policy work, the charity's always retained its core focus on the welfare and well-being of individual animals, and continues to promote the incorporation of animal welfare considerations into all human activities that involve or affect wildlife. And to that end, we promote what we call compassionate conservation, which aims to fully incorporate welfare considerations into conservation programs, and we seek to expose and reduce the exploitation of wild animals. My talk kind of follows on from Kate Litton's talk, so apologies if I repeat any of the points she's made, albeit I'll be focusing more on wildlife. I think we'll be hearing a lot about One Health and One Welfare and the international consensus principles during these sessions, which is no bad thing. I'm sure we'd all agree that animal welfare is important. Many would consider improving animal welfare to be a moral and ethical imperative, and I'd count myself among them. I would strongly argue that it's also essential for successful wildlife conservation. It's clearly important to maximise the chances of success of the rescue and rehabilitation of individual animals, and to reintroduction and rewilding efforts, which are becoming an increasing feature of nature restoration programmes. But there's also increasing recognition of the social and cultural complexity of animal groupings for many species, and the importance of taking this into account through conservation practice to ensure social cohesion. We're beginning to understand that individual animals are important to and play different roles in their family groups and wider populations, and that their welfare and well-being needs to be taken into account to ensure social cohesion. However, getting policymakers and some conservation practitioners to recognise the importance of animal welfare remains a challenge. And the cumulative impacts of climate change, habitat loss and degradation, pollution, escalating exploitation, invasive species, and some of the responses to COVID-19 and other human health risks are resulting in something of a tsunami of pressures on wild animals, which is not only devastating for species and biodiversity conservation, but also exacerbates welfare harms. So I guess the question is, could the global crises we currently face provide opportunities to promote wider recognition of the importance of animal welfare? We're arguably in the midst of three major global crises. First, the climate crisis, driven principally by greenhouse gas emissions resulting in global warming, which presents enormous challenges for all life on Earth. As I'm sure we're all aware, 2023 was recently declared the hottest year on record, with the UK Met Office declaring that global average temperature last year was 1.46 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial baseline. That's perilously close to the objective of maintaining any rise below a 1.5 centigrade ceiling. We need to reduce global net CO2 emissions by about 45% from 2010 levels by 2030, reaching net zero around 2050 to meet current targets. And at our current rates of progress, we will fail to do this. Second, we have the crisis facing global biodiversity. The 2019 Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services concluded that 1 million species are at risk of extinction, and a paper released since suggests the number of species at risk could be double this. Nature's decline is unprecedented. Extinction rates are accelerating. Current global response is inadequate, and transformative changes to our relationship with the natural world are urgently needed. And the third crisis is the global human health crisis. COVID-19 has resulted in more than 700 million reported cases and almost 7 million deaths. At its peak in 2021 to 22, almost 4 million cases were being recorded every day. And as we know, the pandemic brought the world to a virtual standstill and led to huge economic consequences. But COVID-19 is just the latest in a long line of pandemics, albeit arguably the most devastating to date. The UN talks of an era of pandemics, with outbreaks of new and emerging infectious diseases becoming increasingly common. And 3/4 of new and emerging infectious diseases that affect people are believed to be of zoonotic or animal origin, and more than 70% of these originate from wildlife. And of course, many undiscovered viruses with pandemic potential are thought to exist in mammal and avian hosts. Arguably, the reason why zoonoses and pandemics are emerging more frequently reflects the ways humans interact with and exploit wildlife. We're seeing relentless development in pursuit of economic growth and associated destruction of habitat, increasing contact and conflict between people and wild animals. We're also seeing exponential growth in wildlife trade and trafficking, and the commodification of wild animals as exotic foods, traditional medicines, health tonics, pets, high-end gifts, status symbols, or investments. Wild animals are collected, farmed, transported, exported, and traded in huge numbers. The associated crowding, stress, and injury provide the perfect environment for pathogens to emerge, mutate, and spread. And the close proximity to people when they're traded and sold creates the opportunity for human transmission. So we're facing these three major crises, and there is an increasing recognition, I think, that they're all interlinked and that you can't find solutions to them in isolation from each other. Protecting nature and wildlife is key to climate change mitigation. Biodiversity absorbs greenhouse gases, provides a natural carbon store, and buffers against extreme weather and its consequences. Conserving ecosystems is more cost-effective than most human-made interventions. We're increasingly seeing nature-based solutions or ecosystem-based approaches to climate change. And there's some really interesting work by organizations such as Rebalance Earth on the carbon sequestration value of individual animals, such as great whales and elephants, and how to measure and realize this value. Limiting global warming is also key to protecting wildlife and nature. as the world warms up and environments change, many animals and plants find it increasingly difficult to thrive. And this is having profound effects on wildlife populations and the wider ecology through shifts in species abundance and distribution and changes to the predator-prey relationships. At the recent meeting of the UN Convention on Migratory Species in Uzbekistan back in February, the 130-odd member governments agreed on a strengthened resolution on climate change and endorsed a very worrying report on the impacts of climate change on migratory species. And protecting nature and wildlife is also key to preventing future pandemics. As I've said, most pandemics originate in wild animals, but it's only when we disrupt, exploit, and stress them that we create the conditions in which pathogens are likely to emerge, proliferate, mutate, and spill over to other animals and potentially to people. So in addition to considering animal welfare as an ethical and moral imperative, we need to see it as a vital component for successful wildlife conservation and ecosystem protection and restoration, by extension for climate change mitigation, and for preventing and mitigating the risk of future pandemics. So improving animal welfare is a very practical as well as a moral and ethical consideration. And for these reasons, it's vital that we work to integrate animal welfare into the international and national political agenda. However, as I've said, getting welfare onto the international political agenda is hard work, but we have seen some progress in recent times. In the 2019 United Nations Sustainable Development Report, it states the clear links between human health and well-being and animal welfare are increasingly being recognised, and strong government should safeguard the well-being of both wildlife and domesticated animals, with rules on animal welfare embedded in transnational trade. And the 2020 United Nations Environment Programme report on preventing the next pandemic stated strengthened sanitary regulations must go beyond public food markets and include the entire supply chain for domesticated and wild meat, including both farmed and captured wildlife. Adoption of animal welfare standards for the care, housing and transport of live animals across the entire supply chain is also needed to reduce risk of zoonotic disease transmission. Additional restrictions on which species can be legally sold should also be considered. And animal sentience is also increasingly recognised in legal and policy frameworks. For example, the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, the African Union Animal Welfare Strategy for Africa, and UK legislation through the Animal Welfare Sentience Act, which came into force in 2022. In February 2022, the United Nations Environment Assembly, which has 193 member states and dubs itself the world's highest level decision-making body on the environment, adopted a resolution on the animal welfare, environment and sustainable development nexus, which recognises that animal welfare, biodiversity and the environment are connected to human well-being, acknowledges that there is a strong body of science supporting animal sentience, and calls on United Nations Environment Assembly member states to protect animals and their habitats and meet their animal welfare requirements in the context of halting biodiversity loss, restoring ecosystems, mitigating climate change, preventing pollution, reducing the risk of new emerging infectious zoonotic disease, moving to sustainable and agroecological food systems, and achieving sustainable development. And in December of that year, 2022, the UN's Convention on Biological Diversity adopted the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which sets the international framework for biodiversity legislation and policy for the decades to come. Now, while there's no explicit reference to animal welfare in the framework, welfare is included in the operational objectives of the Convention's draft Global Action Plan for Biodiversity and Health, which aims, and I quote, to mainstream biodiversity and health linkages through sector-specific plans, including in the health sector, with a view to reducing the common drivers of biodiversity loss and health impacts, and thus promoting the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity alongside human well-being and animal welfare. The action plan is due to be adopted at the CBD's meeting in Colombia, in October this year. These and other important international mechanisms recognizing the importance of animal welfare give us a lot to build on. Now, for fear of repeating some of what Kate has said in the previous talk, there are some really important initiatives that can be used to promote the incorporation of animal welfare into wildlife conservation and protection efforts. First, the One Health initiative, which aims to bring together multiple sectors and disciplines working to attain optimal health for people, animals, and the environment at local, national, and global levels. This is already embraced by a number of international organizations. It's referenced in the Global Biodiversity Framework, and it should be forming the basis of the International Pandemics Agreement currently being negotiated by the World Health Organization. Back in December 2021, a definition of One Health was adopted by the World Health Organization, the World Organization for Animal Health, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and the UN Environment Programme, which for the first time includes a reference to the importance of well-being. Second is the One Welfare approach, which has been spearheaded by UK-based Spanish veterinarian Dr. Rebecca Garcia, who will be known to many of you, I'm sure. It's arguably broader than One Health in that it promotes the recognition that animal welfare, the well-being of biodiversity and the environment are all connected to human well-being. One Welfare offers a holistic approach and a tool to support disease risk mitigation, while also contributing to efforts aimed at addressing broader well-being issues in relation to the biodiversity and climate crises. And it also aims to promote key global objectives, such as supporting food security, achieving sustainability, reducing human suffering, and improving productivity within the farming sector. Although all through a better understanding of the value of high welfare standards, it's by demonstrating the links between improvements to animal welfare and these key objectives, all of which are closely linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, that we can progress towards embedding improved animal welfare into the international and national legislation and policy frameworks, and achieving the key goal of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a world in which humanity lives in harmony with nature and in which wildlife and other living species are fully protected. So going forward, some key objectives for those working on international policy mechanisms should, I believe, include integrating animal health and welfare through the adoption of One Health and One Welfare approaches to augment efforts to reduce zoonotic disease risk, protect and conserve wildlife and biodiversity, and by extension tackle the climate crisis. Reframing the sustainable use narrative to incorporate human and animal health risks and animal welfare concerns. Valuing and mainstreaming wildlife and nature protection and animal welfare into all decision-making, and adopting robust implementation mechanisms and ensuring adequate resourcing for wildlife and nature protection. If we are to be successful in fully incorporating wildlife protection and animal welfare into international and national legislation and policy making, we need to not only promote it as a moral and ethical imperative, but also as a key mechanism for tackling the crises we currently face and as a vital component of successful wildlife conservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jones. And that would be the concluding presentations of today's sessions. And now I would like to take a moment to thank Dr. Jones for its wonderful presentations full of informations and key takeaways for policy advocates across different levels. And now we will move to the Q&A sections of today's sessions. I would like to invite some of our AfA Policy Coalition's members to the floor to share some of their insights from their national work and learn a bit more from the speakers from today's sessions. First, I would like to introduce Diana, Government Relations Managers from Animal Friends Georgia.
Hello.
Yeah, hello, Diana.
Hi.
Welcome to the Q&A sections of today's sessions. You are welcome to take the floor and share a little bit about your work in Indonesia, as well as your questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the occasion. Well, I would like to thank you so much for the inspirational slides. That was great because we actually have this difficulty to work with this One Health concept with government because they kind of hard to understand the whole concept. So from hundreds of regulation in Indonesia related to animals and farming, there are only less than a handful that mentions animal welfare. And I think it's a strong indication that the government is not prioritizing animal welfare in their strategies. Well, yes, there is animal welfare department that takes care of animal welfare, and they do address the issue, but it's very low in priority. Well, the situation in Indonesia showing that there are lots of human-animal interaction that those in the more developed countries might not witness as often. And I think we all here agree that One Health concept is something that we can improve. And well, the situation in Indonesia showing that the practices have lots of things that might spread zoonosis or the beginnings of new pandemics. A lack of animal welfare is generally present in these human-animal interactions. For example, in the traditional market, we still can find chicken slaughtering with such a not really good hygiene standard, like blood everywhere, and the people who don't have like proper mask or proper gloves to do the slaughtering process. So from our organization standpoint, from AfA standpoint, we joined the campaign for this pandemic treaty, such as One Health campaign in the past few months, and it's kind of difficult to explain how high-level policy, like high thinking required concept should be something people who are on the grassroots could support or care about. So do you have any idea or tips of how we could make the concept more palatable for everyone? Even at an organizational level, everyone is so busy with their work, and it's so hard to add another issue on top of their everyday work. And it shows that there is a need to bring this issue to be more important. So how do we get people, make the government, include animal welfare and also these practices that include human-animal interaction in their agenda and strategies? Maybe you could have some tips and tricks for us about that issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diana. Altamush, Mark, and Kate, would you like to share your viewpoints?
I can start by saying a few words if that's appropriate. Yeah, thank you very much for your summary and your question. This is a really important issue. We work a lot at an international level. As I've said, trying to integrate animal welfare through international legislative and policy process. But the question always arises, how does this actually work at a practical level on the ground? What does it mean? How do you operationalize One Health and One Welfare principles through on the ground actions? And that's a very important and serious question. First of all, as you say, we have to ensure that the policymakers and the managers who are managing these issues at a local level understand the importance of integrating animal welfare into their actions. And as I've said, that can be difficult because many perhaps won't see, I'm sure we do, but many won't see the value of animal welfare compared to some of the other issues that they're trying to tackle and deal with, you know, the human well-being and so forth. So it's really important to continue to emphasize that we're not just promoting animal welfare for its own sake, we're also promoting animal welfare because it can help to tackle some of these other issues that policymakers are facing and improve human well-being. It can have benefits economically and so on. But, you know, those are arguments that we have to use. And I think the other thing that's really important to try and get across is that there needs to be integration and communication between the key focal points at a national or even a local level who are dealing with animal health, who are dealing with human health, and who are dealing with environmental issues. This is kind of happening at an international level, but that needs to filter down to those key focal points within countries and within local regions within those countries. So often there's a disconnect. These people are working in silos and not really communicating with each other. And there's some really, really good information on operationalizing One Health and integrating animal welfare that comes from the likes of the World Organization for Animal Health. So that's well worth looking into. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. You raised very interesting points. And that's part of the reasons why the AfA coalitions is here, and especially the AfA policy coalitions is here to facilitate these collaborations efforts between different national focal points and civil society organizations. I think that Altamush was looking to share his point of view as well.
Yes, yeah, I was, of course. So firstly, that was a very good answer, and my answer will be slightly different. So in Pakistan and Indonesia, particularly, I think this might work, is understanding the local context first. So for example, I mean, Pakistan is Islamic, and we have that in our constitution as well. And I do know that there's a huge population in Indonesia that is also Islamic. So a part of like another one of my different projects that is also One Health based is essentially starting this training curriculum for faith-based leaders in Islam. So these are the most influential people in the Islamic realm. Like these are the people, the imams, basically, who everybody listens to, and that is the case in Pakistan as well. So if you can train them, and the thing is, whatever they say is something people take at face value, at least in the Muslim world, and that will be true for Indonesia as well. You could bring a lot of change very, really fast, and that would involve teaching them not just about animal rights, but also about women rights as well, social justice, and so on and so forth. I felt there was another question within your question. So where you mentioned grassroots. So the thing is, my organization particularly does work on the grassroots level, but that's the rural side of Pakistan. So I do not know how much of the rural or urban divide is in Indonesia, because that really matters, because the human animal conditions or interactions would be very, very different. As in the case in Pakistan, we mostly have farm animals in rural Pakistan, while in urban Pakistan, we have cats and dogs, which are the most important issue. So while on the urban center, my policy approach essentially towards solving the dog culling problem, which is so severe in the country, is actually focusing on rabies, but also on women protection because of domestic violence angle, and also talking about the children because the government, for example, in Pakistan has a policy of just culling dogs, which it makes no sense. So, while at the same time, you would need somewhere in the middle, some kind of an advocacy approach, like a lawyer who could help you. So in our case, we are filing suits against the government as well. But at the same time, we are giving them an opportunity to understand from a One Health framework how they can solve the problem of rabies. But in the rural sector, which will be completely different, our approach is, as I have mentioned in my presentation, to work with the community and give them something first and make them trust you. I think the trust part is the most important thing that we almost forget, and people just don't want to because they have been used for so many times. So I think that's really, really important. And if possible, I would love to discuss this question with you further as well, because we have similar demographics and geography in Indonesia and Pakistan. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Altamush. That was super helpful. And I will follow up the discussions via email later to not just Animals Friend Georgia, but all of the interested participants for today and also the AfA policy members. Thank you. I think that Dr. Kate Littin has questions for you, Altamush. Please feel free to discuss more with Altamush if you want, Dr. Kate Littin.
Thank you. I was just going to make a comment about the other question, which I agree is a great question. Just to say again about the benefits of the nature NGOs joining with the animal NGOs in this work. And we've seen that's a very powerful way to combine voices when dealing with the government, and that again is where One Health and One Welfare, bringing all of the NGOs together to present the same message to governments. I've seen that work. So yes, all the best for your work, and definitely agree with the other speakers, and there is a lot of support available. So thanks, Ngoc Anh. So Altamush, I've got a question in the chat box and or in the Q&A, and I was just wondering if you had any comments on fighting for the inherent rights of nature. So, for example, recognising a forest or river or whales as a person, so granting them specific rights and because of their inherent value, rather than just because they're good, it's good for humans or we get some economic benefit. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Can I comment right now, or should I do this later?
Please feel free to. This is a discussions after all.
So I will do a short comment and we can take this forward, because I love the rights of nature approach. And I've been using that in a lot of my projects outside the US and inside. So this is something you might not know, I mean, because it's from an Islamic perspective, and the reason why I became an expert on animal rights and environmental rights in Islam was because this is what people want to hear in Pakistan. This is what they understand, this is what they get. And the rights of nature is actually an inherent concept in Islam. And because our religion is a state religion, it's in the constitution. Anything that violates the state religion kind of violates the constitution as well. So we are working on that argument. But on the non-government side, what we're doing is we're applying a natural heritage approach. So while they would not understand rights of nature, but they would definitely understand that there's a culture and an identity that's of them, which they're losing on a daily basis in Pakistan. So what we're doing is we are helping old forests, making sure that they're not cut down, and we're placing a plaque on it as well to give it its own historical identity. And that's also true for the animals as well. So that's what we're doing, but it's in Pakistan, it's really new, but I can chat it with you, but we're mostly using the Islamic angle because that's what people get here, but open to discussion. So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was super helpful, Altamush. And next up, we have Dr. Chatterjee from SAMAU, another member of the AfA Policy Coalitions. He'll be sharing a little bit about his insights from India. Dr. Chatterjee, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So hello, everyone, and greetings of World Environment Day. I'm Dr. Devjyoti Chatterjee, working in SAMAU, an intersectional NGO based in New Delhi, India. And thank you so much, Ms. Nong, for giving us this opportunity to share our views here. Taking an example of India's scenario, our country is bestowed with a huge animal resources and biodiversity, diverse culture and ethnicity, and harmonious living of world's largest human population, along with diverse ecoclimatic zones ranging from a temperate to tropical regions. So, as we are a firm believer of the philosophy that the world is one family, and we share this planet with our environment and the environment with our fellow living beings who deserve equality and equity. The recent pandemic of COVID-19 has also taught us the word, this lesson that living in silos will not lead to any resolution or any solution to a problem. Instead, building intersectionality and a cohesive movement is a way forward. So as far as our country's advancement is concerned, India is advancing in this way by embracing the One Health approach. Though this concept was developed in India decades ago, but post-COVID, our national approach has been more focused to address the collective concerns that include human, animal, and environmental welfare aspects. So our country is now finalizing the National Action Plan for One Health, and we already have a National Institute of One Health, a premier interdisciplinary institution, which has been already established, and state-specific One Health cells and centers are also being established as per our national framework. So when it is from our organization level, we at Samayu, how are we involved in this endeavor that actually we are actively embracing this One Health, One Welfare framework for bringing on-ground impact in the lives of animals, human, and environment through intersectional approaches in our key domains, that is poultry and inland aquaculture sectors of India. So we have been able to achieve strategic collaboration with different relevant government departments. So for example, the animal husbandry departments and fishery departments of various states and central pollution control boards, then various premier universities run by government and the research institutes and academia. We have established a strong network with the end users, that's the farmers and consumers in these two sectors that already I've mentioned, that is poultry and inland aquaculture. So with the help of a structured project, we have been able to reach out to almost 300 plus farmers collectively from both sectors in 2 states in India. We have organized 2 designated One Health training programs, one from for each sector in poultry and inland aquaculture, wherein the animal welfare, human well-being perspectives, and the environmental safety were all incorporated under this One Health framework to build capacity and awareness. Also, we have organized a series of policy discussions involving the grassroots level stakeholders to identify the concerns and the way forwards for effective policy progression. Our movement building against banning non-clinical use of antibiotics in the animal agriculture sector has witnessed a significant progress, where we have mobilized the state governments to prepare a strong policy framework in this regard to prevent AMR and safeguarding the animal-human environment health nexus. Our approach towards environmental welfare clubbed with fish welfare in the aquaculture sector has initiated an intersectional involvement in the central province of India, where we are able to establish an interlink of welfare aspects of both the components. Collectively, our efforts on ground are aiming at improving the living condition and impacting the life of around 125 millions of poultry birds, around 500 millions of inland farm fishes, human associated with these 2 sectors, and the environment at large in these 2 states where we are currently functional. So this is how we are establishing an inclusive and intersectional approach on ground to safeguard the welfare of animal, human, and environment, and to establish a sustainable symphony. So here, I'm curious to know about the financial institutionalization of One Health concept for a better implementation perspective with the grassroots level end users. When we interacted with the grassroots level people, often we found that a strong financial policy is required for best implementation and to get the best outcome. So what could be the way forward? If we take a regional, you can say regional scenario, like our Indian subcontinent or a greater Southeast Asia and South Asia. So what could be the way forward? This is a prime thing what I wanted to discuss here. If you can please take this forward from here. Thank you.
Dr. Chatterjee, do you have any specific questions you would like to ask either of our speakers for today, based on the insights from India that you just shared with us?
Yeah, actually, the question is that once we are in line of implementing the One Health, One Welfare concept with the ground users, say for example, the farmers. So introduction of any new concept, any new technology, any new, you can say, a new practice always claims some financial support for best implementation and best outcome. So how can we institutionalize this financial matter? Means how to go ahead with the policy progression when we want to institutionalize the financial aspect of One Health implementation in these sectors, especially the animal agriculture. So if anyone of the speakers can please respond to this.
I think I'll have to be very brief because unfortunately I have to leave the meeting in a couple of minutes for a meeting with the UK government that I couldn't move. So I do apologise for that. It's a really good question. You know, how do we mobilise the financing that's required? It's always a good question around policy issues, particularly when you're dealing with, we're promoting policy changes or policy issues which many in governments don't view as priorities. And there are many other priorities that governments are being lobbied to spend money on all the time. So it's a question of how do we encourage governments to prioritize improvements in animal welfare. As I go back to my presentation, I think one way of doing that is trying to link improvements in animal welfare to some of the other priorities that governments are perhaps more focused on, particularly around human well-being and economic development and so forth. There are obviously international sources of funding which governments can tap into. It's always worth reminding governments that they are committed through their membership of international agreements and so forth to implement some of the measures that we're pushing for. So there's a commitment there. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to come up with the necessary funding. And I think the other thing is to try and emphasize some of the financial and economic benefits that can be gained. I mentioned very briefly an organization called Rebalance Earth, which is looking at the economic value that can be obtained through carbon credit systems by protecting wildlife and individual wild animals that have recognized value in terms of carbon sequestration. So there are some quite clever ways of actually generating finance through improvements to the way that animals are treated and recognizing the importance of their welfare. But it's a challenge, it is a challenge and one that we have to keep working on. I hope that's helpful in some way.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Saaed Saab, any sorry.
Yes, please continue.
Saaed Saab, any input from your end? What's the scenario in Pakistan? If you can kindly share.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have an example that I wanted to share. So I'm working on a different problem, but I'll give you the answer, to explain it. So working on the issue of dog culling, which I know is not agricultural, the main argument that my government actually really wants to hear is the financial cost that comes along the way that we do things as normal. And that cost actually is around $68,000, which translates to 188 million rupees per year for the Pakistani government. And what the problem is, what the government fails to understand in that context is that they are only counting the amount of money that's being required for them to kill the dogs every couple months. What they're not quantifying is the impact that it has on the medical industry as a whole on solving the problem of the medication when it comes to rabies eradication, And that would also be true with animal agriculture if there are zoonotic diseases happening, because what the government normally does is it does not quantify the further additional funding that they need from the medical perspective when it comes to solving that issue. From an agriculture perspective, the first barrier that I'm personally facing is of trust. So I cannot ask the farmers on day one to do this. They will never agree. So and because of the economic issues and so many barriers, the way farming kind of works in Pakistan is from a on a loan-based system. So these farmers, which I'm assuming is true for India as well, the way the system is designed, these farmers are not given their actual earnings. It's basically being taken away from them, and they have to take loans every couple months. And this is a reality to basically just feed their families and buy the seeds. So the first thing that we are doing, and this is through a research project I'm helping a friend with, is just buying them seeds and making sure that the loan problem goes away, that they don't owe any debt to other people, so they can support their families. The next step, of course, is to provide them pesticides, which I don't want to do, but they are not right now ready to change the way they do things as of the way they happen in Pakistan. So this is like a pilot project where we are going to help them increase their own economy. This is all plant-based, so crops, so mostly rice, which is kind of like a cash crop in Pakistan, and the season is coming in as well. So we're trying to build that trust-based relationship, and after 6 months, what we're hoping to do is change the idea, the way people do farming, and that is basically introducing technology. And this is going to take a lot of time, but this is the only way we have thought would be respectful of the farmers themselves, the animals, and the system. But of course, this is on the grassroots right side. I don't have an answer on the government side, but the government normally listens to how much it's gonna cost them, which is why I gave you the example of dog culling. So that's the argument they want to hear there. So it depends on the issue. So I hope that was helpful. But I'm happy to take this forward because India and Pakistan again have the same geographics, and I would be learning from you, which will help me in my work as well, if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Altamush. Obviously, I can connect you and Dr. Chatterjee and other interested members from APC as well. Moving on, I have other questions for Dr. Littin from the audience. The first question is, how can we get more information about One Health and One Welfare?
Sure, thank you. So I've answered some of the questions in the chat as well, but for further information on One Health and One Welfare, and also for information on the World Organization for Animal Health vision. So on One Health, One Welfare, it's really good to look at the One Welfare website and the One Welfare program, and there's a chapter in the One Health book that's on One Health, One Welfare. Also, I've recommended Wellbeing International, and then for more thinking and information, if you don't already have it, on the UNEA work that Mark was talking about. The World Federation for Animals is very closely involved, which I know many of you will probably already be involved with. And otherwise, people are welcome to get in touch with me. I'm really easy to find on the internet, because there's no one else with my name, I don't think, anywhere. So also, Ngoc Anh, if I may, just on the question about financing. So some time ago, the World Bank or IFC made a note, put together a good practice note for animal welfare. And the purpose of that was to really examine the economic benefits of improving animal welfare. So the note is a bit old, but if you look up good practice note for IFC, good practice note for animal welfare, and I can send the link to Ngoc Anh for distribution, but you'll find that information there. And then if you, it gives a good policy sort of framework to thinking about economic benefits of improving animal welfare. And then with the new work, including what Mark mentioned on sustainable finance, we should be able to start to draw on that thinking and sources of funding for improvements in animal welfare, probably more at a government level rather than grassroots. But anyway, you might find those interesting to read. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate, for mentioning the these documents, and I'll make sure to send it to interested participants afterwards. When it comes to financing, I'm open for more discussions. I'm also working with other coalitions specifically on financings, and we would like to also organize a subgroup under AfA policy coalitions to tackle financing and divestment issues as well. There will be an upcoming podcast on this topic released in late June as well for anyone who is interested. And then when it comes to this topic, aside from the IFC, people could be interested in learning more about on this topic based on the reports from the World Bank spring meetings, and also explore the options of working with development banks as well in Asia. For considerations of fundings, and also recently they have an environmental and social framework, which we have sent an appeal letter for to provide our inputs on animal welfare criteria on the investment activities as well. So these are some of the financing activities that we could explore together off the top of my head. A lot of questions for Dr. Kate from the audience as well. Okay. Thank you for sharing the rabbit impact case from New Zealand on the reforestation project. Could you share if there has been an impact on research findings to how they handle the rabbits since the research was published? Seeing animals as pests and eradicating them in the cheapest way seems to be a problem for many species across the region.
I can't see the question, but if the question is about the impact of animals used in research on the paper, so a lot of the, some of the research, I'm not sure about that paper. I'll have to have a look if I understand the question, but some of that research is on animals that are in the wild, so they're not tested in the laboratory for that work. And then there's a lot of information in that publication that talks about how that research needs to be done to ensure that animal welfare is protected as part of the research, as well as animal welfare being one of the outcomes that is sought from the research. So I can send the link around to that document anyway, and hopefully that will explain it a bit better.
Thank you, Kate. And I have another question for you on the topic of natural-based solutions. So what specific policies or guidelines can be implemented to balance the ecological benefits of nature-based solutions with the ethical considerations of animal welfare? And how can stakeholders be engaged in this process?
So I don't think people are doing that well yet. So that's why what I see, and I've in researching for this talk, but also over the last 5 years or so, or probably 10 actually, because we were involved in the compassionate conservation work many years ago when it was first being started, and it's very hard to find actual programs, so on the ground programs where lots of interests are being taken into account. And so that's why we developed the that consensus document that was put together, and then Mark also referred to it. And so what that means is or that's used at a government level rather than at a grassroots level. And what it means is that at a government level, the idea is that the laws are introduced that then require all of the interests to be taken into account. So that's the only way that I've seen that working, is when the government comes along and makes the requirements. It's not common for it to be something that is done voluntarily. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your answers. Do you want to add anything else? Okay. If no, it's okay. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for your very insightful questions and answers, and to our speakers for their thoughtful responses. As we conclude our sessions, I would like to introduce some important upcoming events and opportunities. The floor is yours, Ursula.